Hey, I'm Angelo Pinto, and welcome to Let It Rip. We're coming to you from the CUNY TV studios from the shadow of the Empire State Building in New York City. We're digging into a meeting that has sent shockwaves across New York politics. Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani sitting down with Donald Trump. The headlines have focused on the surprise of the meeting, but the real story underneath all of this is energy, and especially Con Edison. Because this isn't just about an unexpected political conversation, it's about power and who controls it in New York. The surprising alliance from both Trump and Mamdani at a time when New Yorkers are being crushed by skyrocketing utility bills, and Con Edison is back yet again asking the Public Service Commission for another rate increase, signals a new day on this issue for now. Con Edison has mastered the art of raising prices while reporting massive profits, all while working class families are choosing between keeping their homes warm and keeping their families fed. Joining us to discuss this is community organizer Thurga Srinivasan and Raj Goyal. I'm Angelo Pinto, and this is Let It Rip. So Raj, a lot of folks are talking about Mayor-elect Mamdani's meeting with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Is this politics as usual? Were they really breaking ground on some issues? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it was certainly a surprising meeting. I think a lot of people are thinking, what the hell is going on here? What we do know is that there is a shared agenda on affordability. We know that Donald Trump talked about it, hasn't delivered anything on it. In fact, he's regressed on it. We also know that Donald Trump is very mercurial. He's a very volatile guy. And he's also declared war on New York, on our funding, coming after Tish James. So let's see how long this bromance lasts. But the most important thing, I think, is that we've got a conversation going on around affordability. And that, I give the mayor-elect great credit, is that he focused the president, who's obviously famously unfocused, on that shared agenda. And obviously we're going to talk about energy. I've probably never before in the Oval Office meeting has Con Ed and ULURP come up. And these are very New York City things. Two guys from Queens, Zohran and Trump. So I think it was a net positive for New York, but we got to wait and see, and we got to stay focused on the issues that affect New Yorkers.
Thurga, what do you think about the meeting? What were your thoughts when you first saw it? Do you think it's good for New York, the conversation that they had, or the many conversations that they had?
As someone who's often thinking about our most vulnerable, this was likely positive in terms of National Guard is not here yet. Hopefully will not be here for a long time. However, at the same time, we see that ICE is still cracking down on our loved ones, our community members. So yes, we tackled some huge issues, but at the same time, so many New Yorkers continue to suffer under the president's policies.
Do you think there was something more you would have liked to see from the mayor-elect, particularly around ICE, like you mentioned? Folks, the National Guard isn't here yet, but ICE certainly is. Would you have liked to see a conversation around ICE and maybe pushing back how they're entering New York City?
Oh, I would have loved that. So many of us who are on the ground doing the work would have loved that. At the same time, he was talking to a guy who was trying to revoke his citizenship just a month or so ago. So I give him a lot of grace, and at the same time, think we need to bring more people there, and think President Trump has to do better by us.
And Raj, do you think the mayor-elect needs grace in this moment? He's coming into, of course, a city that it takes a lot to make anything happen in New York City, arguably one of the hardest jobs. Do you think he needs grace in this moment? Because he's going to have to show and prove quickly, which will be challenging.
I think we all need grace, and everybody who are in positions of leadership, we need more grace in our politics, we need more grace in our society. In fact, Durga was mentioning ICE. I mean, what an absolute betrayal of American values, of New Yorkers. There was a big raid on my block in Lower Manhattan, south of Canal Street, and it's unjustified, it's un-American. So I do think that the mayor-elect is laying out a proactive agenda. He's appointing people that I think he's appointing some folks that are surprising people. And the real test for this mayor, and for all of us who are in politics and positions of leadership, is, are you delivering for the people or are you not? And that is the real simple frame that can answer a lot of questions. Are things getting better or are they not? And that will be how he's judged, that's how I'll be judged, that's how anyone will be judged.
New Yorkers will want to know this, right? Have things gotten better for them? Thurga, now certainly individuals need grace, but what about corporations? How do you feel about Con Ed? Do you feel like this corporate entity needs grace in this moment, or they need more accountability, particularly for when we talk about affordability for New York City folks?
Imagine one individual getting $15 million in 1 year while they disconnect 88,000 households from having energy. You can't have food, and you also can't even keep the heat on. We have now the highest rate of homelessness for children. We have 150,000 homeless kids, largely black and brown. And this is a corporation. They have enough money. I think he needs to reduce his salary to what most of us are making in the 5 digits, 6 digits, maybe. Okay, he doesn't deserve this. He's not helping the greater good of society. And now it's time for him to pay the price.
And I think a lot of, especially if you talk to New Yorkers, they agree with this. They realize, hey, listen, I don't want higher bills. I have things I need to pay for, and they might not be able to make ends meet. So how do you hold Con Ed accountable, right? These are these huge corporate entities that seem like they can do whatever they want. They raise, rates without accountability. How do we hold Con Ed accountable in this moment?
Well, I think if you step back, it's really important to remember, what is energy? If you think about what a municipal utility was designed to do, it was supposed to take the energy from planet Earth, which benefits all humanity. And it's supposed to distribute energy to the most amount of people for the cheapest amount possible, because it is a public good. What's happened in the corporatization of our life, in the corporatization of this battle between the elites and the non-elites, is now it's just become another profit-making company. Not just Con Ed, but in the last 10 years, the corporate profits of the 5 investor-owned utilities in New York State have gone up 63%. The purpose of a utility was not to have a juggernaut in the stock market. It was to distribute power to people for the cheapest price possible. So we have completely gotten it backwards, and the way to fix it is that right now a lot of people don't know that there is this thing called the Public Service Commission. It is supposed to look out for you and me and for us. It is supposed to look out for the ratepayers. And the utilities go to the PSC, and it's all done, frankly, behind the scenes. Nobody can understand. They actually literally go into secret settlement negotiations for months that are not even open and transparent. And they hammer it out behind the scenes, and they generally rubber stamp these increases. This year, Con Ed went for a huge increase because there was growing outcry over the affordability crisis. They reduced their rate increase, but it still went up. And so a lot of people are suggesting that we need to reform state government to have a watchdog to make sure that we actually attack those prices, and we have clawback provisions, for example. A utility comes in and says, well, I need $4 billion more because of this demand generation or this facility. But what if that actually doesn't get spent? We end up subsidizing that. They should claw that back.
So this watchdog piece, this oversight of Con Edison, could prevent some of these rate increases that we've seen, at least as a first step. But I think one of the things you mentioned too is almost an ideological or theoretical perspective around what's the purpose of energy, right?
Yes, that's right.
And how is it supposed to serve the people? Do you both think in this moment, when you look at Trump, who obviously is this hardcore capitalist, and Zohran who's a democratic socialist, do you feel like this issue of Con Ed is a place where these two ideologies can work together? Or do you feel like they're diametrically opposed, and at some point there will be a clash on these things?
On the one hand, this is one issue that will certainly bring them together, as they've said. Now it's up to people to hold them accountable to that. There's so many things that Trump has promised citizens that he's flip-flopped on. He said he'd improve the economy, but yet we have the highest rate of homelessness, right? So it's not working, what he's saying. As in, you need to hold, again, electeds accountable. So yes, Con Ed is one issue, but at the same time, there are so many issues that we still are fighting for. And sometimes this can be seen as a distraction. When Trump, we just got a casino, there's 3 casinos that have been approved, and Trump is gonna make $9 million out of one of them because it's on his property, right? So he's used this. Yes, I think we need to move on it now, swiftly. And at the same time, it has to be used to create a constant channel with him to make sure he is held accountable.
That's good. Raj, your thoughts on this piece too around this capitalist, democratic, socialist contradiction, or if there is one?
Well, as Durga was mentioning, the issue of energy, and to what you asked, I think actually does transcend any ideology, political labels, and so on. People are pissed because they should be. They know that they're not keeping the lights on longer than they were, but the bill keeps going up and up and up. And they know that it's not transparent. If you looked at a Con Ed bill, I mean, it's like trying to understand a foreign language. Line here, line there, you're trying to understand, you know.
A lot of fees.
Oh, a lot of fees, but it's also a lot of jargon. You know, basic service delivery charge per kilowatt hour over here, and then...
And you don't think it necessarily hinges on the issue of where their political ideologies hinge?
I think on this issue of energy, we are actually finding a cross-partisan, non-partisan alliance because it affects businesses, it affects people, it's commercial, it's residential. And so, of course, political coalitions, Donald Trump and Zohran Mamdani and Democrats and Republicans, of course, were ideologically opposed on many, many things. This is not going to be a kumbaya fight, and how we get to reform of the system is always a big battle. But at the core, I really do think that on energy, we've got a unique moment here where the national political consensus is forming to say, wait a second, we have let our energy system and our utility bills get hijacked. And that sort of momentum can actually carry on down the line on other issues.
Great conversation. We'll stay on top of this issue. I'd like to thank our guests, and when we come back, we'll tackle the recent economic boycott. I'm Angelo Pinto, and this is Let It Rip. Welcome back to Let It Rip. As the holiday season kicks into high gear, Americans are getting hit with ads, sales, and pressure to spend everywhere they turn. But this year, many communities, especially the Black communities, are choosing a different path, a path of strategic spending, intentional withholding, and collective economic power. At the center is the Target boycott, but make no mistake, this isn't just about one store. This is part of a much larger conversation about economic boycotts as a tool for justice. For generations, economic boycotts have been one of the most powerful forms of nonviolent protest we've had. This holiday season, that strategy becomes even more potent, not just to spend, but to spend wisely. Here to discuss is Michael Garner, Chief Business Diversity Officer of New York City, Sadie Campo-Amor, Chief Equity Officer for New York City's Comptroller's Office, and Janice Gassam, Senior Writer for Forbes. Janice, we're going to turn to you. What are your thoughts about the Target fast and the economic boycotts that we've been witnessing around the country?
I absolutely love them. I think that it is such an amazing thing that people are choosing to be more judicious with where they spend their money. I think that these corporations act like they can do no wrong. And so people making an active decision to come together and not spend where we are not valued, I think is so powerful and so important, especially now.
So Sadie, diversity, equity, inclusion under attack. Of course, you've seen the way in which the people have responded to corporations by boycotting like Target and of course Home Depot and others. What's the responsibility of government, and how does government respond to the attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Wow, big question. Thank you so much for having us. Well, first, there's an opportunity when we don't shop at these big box stores. We have an opportunity to support our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues.
Shop local.
Yeah, and they make beautiful products, right? Fighting against a society that's less inclusive also is an invitation to say, what is possible when we support small businesses? So right now I'm wearing an Andean-owned, Brooklyn-based, woman of color designed company, Brooklyn Warmy. This is a great time to put our money where our values are, which is in the pockets of small business owners across the city. Our city is not at all without a lack of talent. Business owners, entrepreneurs, and amazing places where our children and our neighbors and our elders can get gifts. So, and we have a long history about boycotting too, right? And it's an effective, proven strategy that if we want to show up in force and remind ourselves of the mass power organization that we have together, well, in New York City alone, the civil rights movement saw the largest boycott that the nation's ever seen, which is nearly 500,000 students and teachers walking out of schools saying, we want to boycott our schools until they become more integrated and integrated spaces and spaces that celebrate the diverse things that we love about our city. So, and that was months before Brown versus Board even happened. So it's carrying on a legacy, And it's an invitation to shop with our values and put our money where our mouth is, but also to support these wonderful artisans, business owners that are in abundance across our city.
I love this piece around putting our money where our values are. Mike, what are your thoughts on this in the context of the boycotts, government's response to diversity, equity, and inclusion being under attack? Do you think the responses have been effective? Would you like to see more? What are your thoughts?
I would like to see more. And as Sadie indicated, there's a historical value to this. If you think about the late, great Reverend Adam Clayton Powell, Congressman Adam Clayton Powell, who boycotted Bloomstein's department stores back in the 1940s because they wouldn't hire blacks. If you think about that boycott, and then Adam Clayton Powell wrote a book, Dr. King read the book, and he led the bus boycott.
Montgomery bus boycott?
Yes, boycott. That was based upon Adam Clayton Powell's business model. So yes, so certainly we should not be spending money where we're not being supportive. So if there are no blacks or Hispanics on your board, why are we buying their products?
So this attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, one should let us think about history, right? This historical trajectory of economic boycotts and also what that means for us, right? But also, and this is to you, Janice, how do these corporations respond to this economic pressure we're placing on them? How have you seen Target respond in this moment to this tremendous economic pressure on them? Do you think they'll do more? Do you think the folks have to keep the pressure up to see changes? How do you see things playing out?
Yeah, from what I've seen, Target hasn't done anything. They've issued apologies and sort of like, just like a lot of these companies, they haven't really done enough. And I think that they can keep playing in the faces of consumers without consequences. I think Target is an excellent case study because since February, Pastor Jamal Bryant has called for a boycott of Target. And if you've looked at their numbers month after month in 2025, their profits have been steadily declining, right? And this is the time of year, especially when a lot of these large corporations see the most profits from holiday spending. And so I think that as consumers, we have to be really, really intentional about where we spend our money. I know a lot of people who I encourage them to boycott Target, but they're like, oh, it's too easy. You know, I have a friend who lives in Brooklyn and she's like, there's literally 2 big Targets right by where she lives. So it's like Sadie was saying, we have to be intentional about shopping smaller businesses. I think that the product that we're getting is better when it's a smaller business. And I think we have to keep putting pressure on these large corporations because they're going to continue to mistreat us if they think that they can without consequence.
Let's look at boycott. So the Dr. Reverend Al Sharpton encouraged a boycott over Costco. Blacks started buying our products from Costco and their sales went through the roof. A boycott.
Yes, and their stocks. Are there any other places that you feel like folks should be spending their dollars with? Because we often say, of course, boycott, vote with your wallet, but where do you buy? Are there other institutions, folks, that you say, listen, folks should begin to move or pivot their dollars in those directions? You've done a lot of work with the MWBEs. So what should folks do, folks looking for direction around where to spend their money? What would you say to them?
It is my understanding that NAN is getting ready to release a list of firms who we should be supporting and buying because they have pro-Black, pro-Hispanic focuses. And so that list is coming out in a very, very short period of time.
So Sadie, we were talking about, where folks should be pivoting to spend. Of course, boycotts are happening, but then the question becomes, where do you spend these dollars now? And of course, folks are looking at different corporations, local businesses, but how does the government and the administration, how should they respond to this? Who should they spend their money with?
Yeah, so I think there are 2 threads to that question, which is what can government do? And one is look at the barriers that exist for small business owners, particularly women of color, but of course, all minority and women-owned business, which is everyone but people who identify as white men, right? So it's the global majority of us. What are the barriers that exist for businesses to succeed in doing business with the city, but also doing business in general? Those are lots of different answers, but a big one is, of course, access to capital and some of the regulatory forest that exists to even getting an MWBE certification at the city or the state. That's one thing. And the other thing is naming that there's an intersection of racial equity and economic justice, right? That when we invest in small businesses or in our neighbors or in local artisans, that we're also doing our part to close a racial wealth gap that is pernicious, right? Right now, almost 9 out of 10 single-parent households are worried about how we're paying rent and for food this month as we have this discussion. So as the holidays come up, affordability isn't just a question from a pie in the sky, it's impacting all of us. And as we think about what can gifts look like, right, gift giving from a place that's down the block, that's a mom and pop shop, is really a way of keeping an ecosystem and of our neighborhoods healthy, and also investing in the people that built our city, which are everyone, which is a bunch of us.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Janice, a question around this new administration too. Often you hear some undercurrents of folks who say when you look at MWBEs and you look at diversity, equity, inclusion, sometimes or oftentimes it appears that white women are benefiting from these things. How do we respond to that? How do we pivot to make sure that doesn't happen? What are your thoughts around all those pieces?
Yeah, I think that at the beginning of 2025, there was this narrative that was going around that Black people shouldn't care about the dismantling of DEI because Black people, quote unquote, don't benefit from DEI policies and practices. And there is some validity to that, where if you look specifically at like board members within corporations, when you look at just the sheer numbers of leadership, white women have benefited on average more than other demographics when it comes to DEI policies. But when you also look at the data, when these policies or practices are removed or they're not present within a workplace, Black people are often the ones that are harmed the most. So there is some truth to that, right? But I think that it's important that we recognize that in the absence of these policies and practices, Black people are harmed the most, but all of us stand to lose, right? Because it's not just about race, it's not just about gender. It's, do you have a place where a breastfeeding person can express milk? Is your workplace accommodated for somebody who has a disability or is wheelchair bound, right? There's so many ways that diversity, equity, and inclusion benefits all of us.
That's right.
And so we have to really think about, and I think we as practitioners need to do a better job of also helping people to understand that, because the narrative that's being pushed by the opposition is that DEI is just people of color who aren't qualified getting jobs, right? And so we have to really understand that it's something that benefits all of us, a policy that helps the most harmed population actually benefits everybody in the workplace, right? If you look at something like closed captioning in a Zoom meeting or in a virtual meeting, it's specifically for some people who are hard of hearing or who, are deaf, but it benefits all of us to have a transcript of the conversation, right? So we have to think about how we center the most harmed and how not having these policies in place impact all of
Affects
us.
us all, certainly, certainly. Mike, last question. Of course, when we look at this incoming administration, there's been some thoughts around the MWBEs, of course, as we were discussing, going to white women more so than Black businesses. How do you think an administration coming in responds to that? How do they address that? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's 2 points here. The first point is that we live in the most pro-MWBE region in the nation. If you look at the $6.9 billion that was awarded by the city of New York to MWBEs last year, if you look at the $3 billion that was paid by the state of New York, you're talking about $10 billion in opportunities. Certainly, we should focus on making sure that Blacks and Hispanics are getting the opportunity to bid, and when they're bidding and not winning, let's debrief them. And access to capital is always important. And we need to focus on creating an environment that's conducive to the outreach, recruitment, integration of MWBE firms into the various agencies' buying processes. When you talk about the incoming administration, certainly they are going to benefit. And I'm optimistic and sure that the incoming mayor is going to learn from the best practices of the city and the state and going to take this MWB program to a higher level. And so we are currently at 36%. 36% of all city contracts that's being awarded are being awarded to MWBE firms. We need to focus now on the disparity within the disparity, making sure that Black and Hispanic-owned businesses are getting their fair share of bid opportunities and contracts. And last but not least, Blacks and Hispanics should not be buying products from corporations who do not share their values. If there are no Blacks and Hispanics on those boards, if they are not doing business with Black and Hispanic-owned businesses, the Black community should not be buying their products and their services.
Certainly. We will stay on top of this issue. I'd like to thank our guests, and when we come back, we'll tackle the recent economic boycott. I'm Angelo Pinto, and this is Let It Rip. Now for some final thoughts. We've covered a lot, from the energy questions surrounding the Trump-Zohran meeting to the power of economic boycotts and buying Black. But if there's one through line, it's this: power moves when people move. Whether it's Con Edison raising rates, politicians making backroom energy decisions, or corporations expecting our dollars without giving us dignity, the message going into the new year is clear. We are not powerless. We are the power. When we demand transparency in our energy system, when we question whose agenda is shaping our future, when we withhold our dollars from companies that harm our communities and reinvest in those that build us up, we reshape the landscape. So as we enter the new year, let's watch closely. Let's spend strategically. Let's organize intentionally. Because the fight over energy, economics, and justice doesn't just stop in December. They define what kind of 2026 we're walking into. I'm Angelo Pinto, and this is Let It Rip.